Hey there, welcome everybody. This is Aradani Con, and we are doing an art panel on finding your artistic voice. If you're live with us now, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're watching this later, I guess thank you too. So you got around to it, at least good on you. All right, so I'm going to be joined today by a couple of guys, but for starters, I am Sam Flegal, and you can find my art at fatefulsigns.com. Alan, why don't you go next?
I am Alan Panakal, and you can find my art at ancientones.net.
All right, Chris.
And I'm Christopher Burdett, and the best place to find my work right now is at christopherburdett.blogspot.com.
All right. And I've posted those links down in the famous doobly-doo that these videos all seem to have. And so if you want to click on those and peruse and see kind of what we're doing and what we bring to the table, feel free to do that either now or later at your leisure. First I want to say thanks to Aradani, Mike Blotchick, Paul Blotchick, Sarah Blotchick, and their whole crew for putting together this event that we're participating in. Obviously, everybody's trying some different stuff these days. And so the idea of an online convention is something that I'd say even 3 months ago, I would have absolutely been like, hell no. But, here we are in a different world, and it's going really well. They're doing such a great job with it. Their Discord is happening, and yeah, it's all going. Have you guys done any of the other events with AradaniCon so far?
Yeah, I've been catching I caught a few of them, as many as I can. Time permitting, obviously it's going on all day. So I caught one with building your armor. I watched Mike build a map on that was pretty cool. Actually, it gives me a lot of ideas.
Mike, he does good maps for D&D or for gaming in general.
Yeah, so his was like about 2 hours before ours. So they're all very interesting. I'm learning some new stuff.
And I was on the drinking with the artists last night after the con closed. We were at the bar.
Oh, okay, nice. That's good. I was playing Skyrim for the first time last night because I'm forever on the cutting edge of 10 years ago.
Dude, I just started a little bit ago too. So
yeah, well, I figured now's a great time to dump thousands of hours into something that gets me through. So anyway, what the panel is about, we're talking about finding your voice as an artist. I feel like before we really delve into that, we should maybe talk a little bit about what does that mean? Do you guys have any specific thoughts on what an artist's voice is or is not?
I'm gonna wing it here. So
right? You're gonna ear it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ear. Oh yeah, I put on my ears. Nope. Why did you guys do the same, man? You left me hanging.
I don't have ears.
My daughter's got some, but I don't have ears either.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. I feel like finding your voice is a little bit edges a little bit on when you do your artwork. You're in a happy place doing it, and you're like laser focused, and you know that's what you should be doing. Versus when you're doing artwork where you're like, you kind of know you don't want to do it, and you're doing it because you have to. Maybe like a lot of freelance work. Sometimes you don't like doing it, right? But you have to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, sure.
I'm not calling anyone out. I'm just saying, like, that's how I feel anyway.
Do you have any initial thoughts?
I think something, for me, an artist's voice is somewhere between style and kind of like spiritualism. If that sounds like it's the work that only you make. It's when you put your stylus, your brush, your pencil, whatever, to the paper, and it is your personal manifestation of your personal narrative, the things that you're interested in. It's basically, the people who, you can tell when people are doing their work. It's their voice. You can spot it a mile away. That's for me.
No, I definitely agree. And I think there's a distinction between style and artistic voice. In the sense that I think style often comes down to a number of things, one of which is how you make art. But a big part of that is what medium you use. When you jump from pencil to ink to watercolor to oil painting, you will see some differences in the style. But when an artist has a strong voice, that does not change. That shines through regardless of the style. I've been really enjoying watching Mike Mignola has been doing drawings of like the Flintstones and old comic book characters from when he was a kid. He even threw in a Skeletor in there, which I thought was pretty funny. But when you look at them, you don't think, oh, that's Fred Flintstone. You think, oh, why is Mike Mignola drawing Fred Flintstone? Like it almost takes a minute to realize who the character is, because it's so Mike before it ever becomes the other character. And that's just one example, but I'm sure we can all. Do you guys have a go-to when you start thinking about artistic voice? Like an artist you either look up to or think.
I was thinking Mike Mignola, actually.
Yeah, all of us are, right?
Yeah.
Took it first. Now y'all copy
Yeah. No.
Yeah. John Harris is a huge influence on my work, obviously. If you don't know John Harris. And Sparth, he's another one. If you haven't checked out his work, both those guys, I kind of have like a mesh style of both of them, I guess. John Harris is primarily oils, though, so that's where I falter, I guess. I don't paint traditionally. I do a lot of my stuff digitally. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So we're getting some people throwing in talking about Alan Lee. Absolutely. Got Connor Harrington. I think everybody can. It's one of those things that's hard to talk about, because when you talk about artistic voice or style, it's one of those things that you recognize it in other people way easier than you recognize it in yourself. And again, since we brought up Mike Mignola, my favorite quote on this particular topic is by Mike. And it was when, I believe Chris was there with me. We were at the IMC together when Mike was there, and he was doing a panel, and he was doing like a live drawing. And so the IMC is the illustration masterclass for anyone who's not familiar. And he was saying that he spent his whole life trying to do a decent Jack Kirby drawing, but all he ends up making are crappy Mike Mignola drawings. And I think that for most of us, that's how it feels. And so that's one thing I want to talk about today, is like how it feels versus what the reality is are really discordant when it comes to artistic voice and style. And I think, for me at least, where you see someone really start to bloom with their artistic voice, because we're always in the process of discovering our artistic voice. I think that's something else, is it's mutable, it changes over time. But when you see it in another artist and they really seem to click and get it, for me, is when they embrace their own quirks and lean into them rather than trying to keep fixing them. Chris, you're nodding your head. You want to throw in on that?
There's definitely, we all are a younger artist at some point, and eventually we become an older artist. And I think there's moments that I know I've experienced and I've seen, and it's been done to me, where someone I look up to kind of like takes a step back and they're like, whatever this is, keep doing this, because it's that moment of like they see it happening. And I've seen it with younger artists too, that I've watched their careers, and it's like at some point they're like, and it's like I can see the development. It's starting to happen. But it's like putting your finger on exactly what that is. It's part of the journey.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, if I feel I agree with Chris on this. Like, kind of putting your finger on what it is really hard to find out. But there's always that like feeling of where you're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if this looks good, but you put it out there, right? So everyone else can see it. And then the larger percentage of the time, the reception you get from that is actually pretty positive. So then you're sitting there like, awesome, people really like this stuff. What did I do that made them really like it, right? So like, even though the audience is like, this is amazing, you did an awesome job with this, I love everything about this, you're still, I feel at myself, I don't know if other artists have this, probably do, are sitting there thinking, well, okay, what did I do? What did I do specifically that on this piece that got this reception for it, right? And the answer is always different, right? It could be the colors, it could be the subject matter, it could be anything, but no one's ever going to give you the right answer. is my point. You're constantly going to be making stuff. You just have to keep making it and hope it's good.
So Alan, let me ask you this question. Do you feel like you found your own artistic voice?
I feel like I'm like right there.
Yeah.
Like, cause I, you know, like I'm pushing, I had to like kind of like rush and get stuff done for this book that I'm going to kickstart in a week, which is, I don't want to talk about, we can talk about it later if you want to. It's super stressful, but you know, there was a moment where I'm just like, I'm short on illustrations, but then the secondary feeling is I'm not 100% happy with what I'm making. But once I feel like I'm like, it's kind of one of those deals where like I made the pieces and then I was like, you know what, these aren't that bad. And I constantly tinker with my stuff over and over. If anyone has been following my work from when I first started doing it, can see the evolution of all those pieces, right? They've changed in the last like year. So I guess to answer your question, it's halfway in between yes and no. There's no positive yes.
What about you, Chris? I think on this particular panel, you have the most seniority.
Wow.
Do I? Well, I mean, I think in many ways that I've gone towards it and stopped and changed directions a couple of times because throughout my career, I primarily was a digital artist. I painted digitally, and I was really focused on that skill set, full color environments, stuff for Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, that kind of stuff. And I got to a point where I really felt like I was locking in on something, but it wasn't fulfilling me. And I changed mediums. I went to acrylic and I started doing that, and it just wasn't getting it either. And a lot of this was client work. And then I really realized after 20 years in the industry, it's like, I need to do my stuff. And that's when I focused on my book, and I'm making the art I want to make with the medium I want to make. I'm a drawer. I've always been a drawer, and I've been doing these very large tone paper drawings and telling my stories. And I'm not changing now. I'm not looking back. I'm moving forward. I'm going to be doing this. And it just kind of, it feels right. It's the only thing I want to do now. And but it was a long journey, and I, very easily could not have gotten here if I had focused on other things. But it's doubling down on your own voice.
I also feel like there's a little bit of trying to think of the right way to say this. Just like not overthinking what others say to you about your work. Like just like, cause like I've had people say to me like, you don't really draw well, you draw like, but you know how to like manipulate shapes, right? Like I know how to take shapes and make it look like something, but apparently I don't know how to draw. So I was like, okay. And I sat on that for like a week, but then I thought, okay, they're not wrong.
I mean, all drawing is manipulating shape.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it. But I wasn't going to argue that point with this individual, right? I was just like, cool. Thanks for that comment, but that's so, but in a sense, that's the one thing I know how to do, right? I know how to take a bunch of random shapes that look like nothing to anyone when I start them, and then bring them all together to look like something to people when they look at it. If they look at it long enough, like if you just run by my work, you're not going to notice what it is right away. So, I think that's a little bit part of like, I'm trying to think how to say this right, but that's a little bit of finding your voice, is like not listen to what people have to say, but don't sit on it so long if you don't agree with it, like
there's a couple of things you guys have touched on that I definitely want to highlight. The first is, Chris, you were talking about digging in on personal work being the moments where you felt like you had the most breakthroughs. But the other is also talking about how you worked to develop your artistic skill for years. And I do think like that's a thing we have to talk about, is that you do need to be proficient with the mediums that you're using. And, for as an oil painter, like you do need to learn about the chemical process or how color mixes, and you can't just disregard that aspect of things, but also that's not where your artistic voice comes from. That's just the instrument. That's the tool. I will use music as an example by comparison. Is like, if you know a lot of chords on the guitar, it makes it easier to play songs, but you can also play some really beautiful music with just a couple of chords. And so I think we should get that out of the way, but I want to dig in more on the personal work aspect. And Chris, if you can talk about what do you mean when you say more fulfilling, and why you've decided like you're not going back? Can you highlight any of that?
Well, I mean, the world that I'm working on is the Grand Bazaar of Ether Vandalia, and it's a world that I first envisioned 22 years ago now, and it hits on everything that I've always stylistically and like genre wise. It focuses on all the things I like: fantasy, monsters, a lot of monsters, some science fiction, a lot more monsters, and and I realized after I've been working for all these people, all these in film, TV, games, doing all this stuff, building worlds and building monsters and telling stories in whatever way I can through their work, I realized that I should really be telling my story, because no one else is going to tell my story. No one else is going to do, no one else is going to do my work. There will be more people to keep painting Boba Fett's for people. And, if someone needs dragons, there'll be a ton of people, but no one's going to be making my monsters. No one's going to be telling my stories. And I just realized that I need to express myself fully in my work finally, instead of, spending my time and my energy telling other people's stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So I find like talking about, the other people's worlds as a gateway to your own world, I think also makes a lot of sense. Because like, I know for me, going back and like, even just why I love fantasy art probably goes back to He-Man and Thundercats when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and just like being bombarded with those images and just thinking, how freaking cool is it? And it wouldn't be until years later that I would learn that like Conan was basically their attempt to make a Frank Frazetta painting come to life. And that's actually a direct quote from some of the artists who worked on He-Man in the early days. Like, they all saw the Conan paintings by Frank Frazetta and they were like, how do we make toys out of this? Let's also make an animated show. And that's just like, burned at a stage of development. And so that'd be a thing like, like as a tip for people watching, how do you find your artistic voice? I think the first one is getting in touch with your inner child and getting in touch with the things that excited you when you were little. And so like for Chris, right, you're talking about Star Wars, but it's not just that you love Star Wars. I know Chris really well. So I'm gonna reveal that Chris loves monsters from Star Wars, right? It's not Boba Fett. You mentioned him, but Boba Fett's not your favorite. Who's your favorite character from Star Wars?
It would be the bounty hunter Bosk, and of course Admiral Akbar, and space lizards
and a lizard. Yeah. And so, but then you look at your art that you've been making, and you are creating this bazaar. But man, that bazaar, it kind of looks like the cantina scene from Star Wars. Cranked up to like 100, right? We're not even talking about like you're like, that cantina scene didn't go far enough. Those monsters weren't crazy enough. This is, where things are coming for you, is like you just keep going deeper and deeper in, and it's because it's not about capturing Star Wars. It's not about digging into the IP, though it feels like it is at first. What it really is about you getting that feeling of awe that you experienced when you realized as a kid that monsters were freaking cool.
Yeah.
And so
you're not wrong.
He's not that whole statement.
That's the thing, like when people are listening to this, like, how do I find my voice? Step one, draw, paint a lot. Like there's no
way around that.
Yeah, there's no way around. You just have to make lots of stuff. But along the way of making lots of stuff, pay attention to those moments that make you laugh or make you smile or get you excited or leave you with that little tinge of nostalgia that Hollywood is so good at pulling on the strings of these days. At least maybe they've always been good at it. It's just now hitting our generation because we're old. But like that's the other thing. Yeah, in the chat, David's saying, look how many artists Tolkien has inspired. Exactly. And so you're coming back. Saki, yeah, that's absolutely right.
Graffiti inspired. That's
Going
my
back
stuff.
to graffiti inspired stuff because that was my jam when I was a kid.
I mean, I did a ton of graffiti when I was a kid. Then I studied graphic design. So then I lean into both those when I started making my stuff. It was completely random, right? Like I was literally just messing around at work at my day job, instead of working on the websites one day. And I happened to have a friend who walked by, and I was actually working on a Boba Fett piece, believe it or not. And, my friend was like, "That's awesome. What are you working on?" I was like, "I don't know." And then, the more I developed the style, it's like, what you were saying about think of the things that you really loved. Like my stuff, like I love Star Wars, obviously. I love Voltron. I watch that like it's my religion. Thundercats. Those are I try to like my stuff. I'm trying to find that like 80s like hype that I used to love as a kid. I ran home to watch these cartoons, right?
Right, and it's not shocking that you have a pink painting behind your head, right? Like exactly. Art, but just looking at the color schemes you like to use, they are some.
I mean, my cousin sent me a watch, and I was like, first I was like a pink watch, and I was like, wait a minute, I got you. Yeah. It's like I love synthwave music. I love Outrun style. I love 80s cartoons. When I work with, I have, writers that help me develop some of this stuff. When I work with them, I have to like drive that point home because a lot of them want to use, like they love hard sci-fi, hard science fiction and fantasy. Whereas I'm like, yo, let's get back to the fun stuff. Like I don't want the mathematics. I want the cool stuff. I want the fun. Like remember like Jason the Wheel Warriors and stuff like that.
I don't care how the Millennium Falcon works. I just know that Jedi is cool.
Yeah, I don't care about the aesthetics of why the lightsabers don't fire through everything when they ignite. Like I just like the fact that they work.
Yeah, laser sword. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I went over to a neighborhood friend's house, and his older brother was probably like 10 years older than us or thereabouts, and he had all these little pewter miniatures that I had no idea what they were. They were Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, and I saw those. And I got it up close, and I was just like, it changed everything. I ran home and got out my modeling clay and started sculpting my own little monsters and drawing them and having them do stuff. And it was soon thereafter that I discovered the Monster Manual. And there's just a book of monsters. And I didn't care about the game. I had no interest in playing the game. I just like deciphering this tome that like had all this weird information about all these monsters. Yeah. And I made I made up my own thing. I just thought about it like, ooh, what does this mean? What does it mean? A cone breath weapon? I have no idea what that is, but I'm going to come up with an idea, and then I, saw Star Wars and I haven't looked back.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And for me, like, where I feel like I've really started to find my artistic voice was when I was working on the Havamal, which I know you guys know me. For the sake of the audience, the Havamal is 1,000-year-old Viking poetry. And a few years ago, I took a break from working on jobs like Warhammer 40K, Warhammer Fantasy, Legend of the Five Rings, and I took a month off, and I would do these ink blobs and keep them all over my studio. And then I would meditate on one of the Viking verses, and then I would find a drawing inside of it. So that's the 1 second pitch or the elevator pitch. But what was really going on there is it was me digging into a text that I really wanted to learn more about, but also starting with these ink blobs that were really light. They change up. They get you out of your own head because you start finding shapes rather than you start doing, which is kind of similar to what Alan's doing. There's also, if you look at some comic book artists, you'll see in the How to Draw books, they start with a whole bunch of scribbles, and then they start finding what those scribbles mean. These are all different techniques to the same thing, which is to engage your subconscious rather than your ego when you're making art. And what I found interesting about doing this project and making, I think I did like over 40 drawings for the first book, and there were certain things I just kept finding over and over again. And obviously some of it was subject matter. I was working with Vikings, so there were lots of spears and helmets and swords. But I also noticed I always tended to give my guys bigger noses. I found things like giants and goblins and old wizards were easier for me to dig into. When I did women, they typically had really big butts. I don't know, there's probably something in there too. And you just start, finding these little bits of like, what's inside you. And you start, for me at least, I was able to look at these things that kept repeating, because obviously it wasn't that the ink blobs all had these shapes in them. It's that I was putting something in there as I tried to find the shape. I would find a nose or an eye first, and the creature or the image would evolve out of that. And anyway, just wanted to suggest that if you feel like you're having trouble pinpointing these things and looking into your past isn't working for you, I would encourage you to take a text, do a bunch of ink blobs and try and pair them together and see what you find and see what develops. Even if you're just working in pencil, even if you're just doodling around, you'll see that you have your own shape language. And I think that's another part of style, is when you start to recognize your own shape language, it stops becoming a mistake, and it starts to become a thing of, this cloak is fine. I'm using reference for some guy with like a windy cape, but also, it'd look cooler if it did this swirly, I don't know, I just want this other thing to happen. Well, just lean into that and make it happen. And the more you do that, the more you get comfortable in that space. That's when people start to look at your stuff and go, oh man, that is a Sam Flegal drawing right there. And that's a Chris Burdett. That's an Alan Panakal. Whoever it is, that's where people start to see you in it. And when people point that out to you, lean in even more. Take notes about what's going on. So we've had a couple of questions along the way, and I want to hop in with those now, since we're getting towards the latter half of this panel. World of David Wood is wondering, have you ever thought you found your voice, but it only to be a small step along the way to something that is much more wider than you thought? I think the short answer is yes.
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 But perhaps in a little more detail, I would add that I think even though I now feel more strongly about my artistic voice than I did 3 years ago, than I did 10 years ago, I still feel like it's evolving. And for me, that's a very exciting part. I like making stuff right now because I just keep wondering, how is it going to turn out? What am I going to discover? And being in a place of that discovery for me is really exciting. But different people have different experiences. Chris, you want to throw in on that?
Oh, definitely. Like I was saying, that I've had several different directions that my career's gone, and I've stopped and changed as I needed to. So I was beginning to build, I was doing a lot of Star Wars work, and I was building full environments, and I was telling stories, and I was creating a world, and I was putting in a ton of other characters into a piece, because it would be a piece where you're like, oh, you just need to paint Salacious Crumb. But it's like, no, I want to paint Salacious Crumb sitting in front of Jabba on his dais, and I want to have a Jawa in the background with the palm frond fan, and I want to have the bubbling bowl of the frog creatures. Yeah. It's like I want to just keep putting more and more and more, and I realized that there is a limit. There are rules for that universe. There are rules for doing stuff for that IP and that client. And when it came to my work, I was like, for me, I can just keep putting more and more and more, and that no one's stopping me but myself. And there's a piece that I'm prepping right now to get ready to start, and I'm happy with the sketches. I'm happy with my reference. I'm happy with where it goes, but it was missing something, and I realized I didn't have a narrative. I didn't have a little extra to go in there to make it more. So instead of because it's a bean vendor. It's a monster that sells beans, and I had him, and he's kind of sad, and he's surrounded by all these things of beans and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I have this sad monster character, and then I realized, but why is he sad? But why? I hadn't asked myself, but why? And I realized that I need to have the whole thing full of all these weird insects and little creatures and things stealing the beans and taking the beans away and messing with the beans. And he's just kind of in his shop with an infested bean supply of just all these things. And I'm like, that, and that's for me, like thinking about finding your voice. It's like, that's my voice. It's telling a story through these monsters. It's kind of like, oh, you have a monster, but why? Why is he sad? Why is he here? What's, and that's, yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's one of the things I love about your work, Chris, is, and this is again, something we've talked about a lot. It's because ultimately you are the monster. I am the monster, right? It's about the real through line of your work is that feeling of being ostracized because of how you look and how you feel around other people. And that's something I think most people ultimately relate to, is we all feel like the monster at the end of the day. But I don't know, like, do you know when you realized that was the through line? Was that always there for you, or was there a point where you went,
no,
wait a minute?
It definitely, I think it was always there, but I was completely unaware of it for a long time. And it happened in my career because I was, I was still under the assumption that to be an artist, you had to do everything. So I was trying to do wizards and warriors and knights and, but I would do these monsters.
Right, let's just say that's not true.
Yeah.
You don't have to do everything.
Yeah. And so I would have monsters in my portfolio, and I would have people looking at my work and they're like, why is this monster so much better than this wizard guy? And I'm like, I don't know. And it's like, it took time. But then, as I started using a lot more reference and being smart and using reference, I used myself. So I posed for every single monster that I ever, everything I do now, it's based on me. I model, I set up, do photo shoots. So it's like I have become the monster in all of my work, one way or another. Yeah. So
I love that she's making coffee behind you right now.
Yeah. Well, I am in the kitchen.
That's all good.
So we've got another question that's come up in two different ways here. Jabi is asking, what if you feel pulled and inspired by 737, 485, 3 different things, which that's hilarious that you just threw that number. And then also from, was that Ariescapes or Ariescapes? I like that. All right. How do you find focus in one kind of direction when you feel pulled in multiple directions, say exploring multiple styles or multiple mediums? And so, there's, I have a few tips along this way, which is a great thing you can do is start to make a list of your influences, list out the people that art you love, but then after making a list of the art that you love, or even the things that you love, and it is important to actually make a list, even if the list ends up being 7,374,800, whatever. And then also, then you're going to go through and pick not just the stuff you love, but if you could draw or paint like one or two of them, who rises to the top as the people you wished you worked like? And if there are multiples, just pick one and then spend the time trying to emulate that one person. Same thing is true if multiple mediums are calling you. Absolutely. Within your lifetime, you will be able to do watercolor, acrylic, oil. You can do it all. But for now, just focus on one. Be like, you know what? For this month, I'm going to do inks. Next month, I'm going to try watercolors. And, it's okay to constantly revise where you are. I'm not saying that from this point on, you only get to work in black and white, or you're only going to do oil painting. You can do whatever later. But if you give yourself the option to do all of those things at once, you'll get the whole analysis paralysis thing. And so it's much easier to break it down into, I'm going to work this way for now on this one project, and I'm going to finish this one project, because finishing is a big part of being an artist. is being able to finish. And so then, you're able to grow from there. Alan, you want to throw anything on that? Because your styles, or I should say your medium, is really specific to, largely working in vectors. Do you ever feel pulled in different directions?
I mean, so I am actually trying a couple ideas with my style, because over the years I've had people say, why don't you do this traditionally? And I'm like, it's super hard. Like, I'm so used to doing stuff digitally. I feel like there's that. So like, the feeling of like how so it's a little stressful to try a different medium. So I've tried acrylics, which I feel like might be the medium for me if I did traditional work. But I used to also do a lot of inks and watercolors. So I've been kind of leaning back into that traditionally. But it's a side like hobby I'm trying still, right? I'm not going to stress it. I'm not worried if it fails. I don't know what that sound was. There's an alarm.
Microwave.
Oh, okay. But like I've also done a thing where, like my style has a lot of like a cutout look to it. So I've been trying different things. I've been trying to like cut my pieces apart into like hundreds of pieces and then put it all back together like a jigsaw puzzle in layers. Chris and I have talked about this before. So, and I'm trying to like build like a 3D scene with it. So what I'm trying to say is I'm experimenting in different mediums and having a good time with it. And if I feel like any of those mediums is not working out, I'm not quitting it, but I'm taking a break from it. Like I'm just like, all right, I'm not going to work with acrylics right now because they dried out too fast. They got on my nerves. I haven't tried oils yet, honestly, because I feel a little bit like I'm actually a little scared to use oils because of all the stuff that goes along with taking care of oils. Why don't you just put her on the show, man? I don't know if that answers the question or not, but my point is if you feel like you want to try different styles, try them. If you feel like it's not working, just put it aside temporarily and revisit it when you feel like you want to, or don't revisit it if it stressed you out so much. Like I'm not good with graphite, so a lot of my stuff deals with me doing the digital work first and then transferring it, right? And then drawing it out again. So I don't know.
Johnny's harping the point. Sorry to be difficult. First of all, that's fine, man. Thanks for asking questions and being here live in our chat. But how do you know when you're looking at something you want to work like and something you just really love? You might not.
I don't think like you should try like. For years, I love comic books. For years, I was like, I'm gonna draw like Jim Lee, but I don't draw like Jim Lee. Nobody draws like Jim Lee, right?
Only Jim Lee.
So like, only Jim Lee, exactly. And there's a lot of people that draw like Mignola, but it's never 100% Mignola. So like, don't try to how do you say this? Don't try to copycat the style. Does that make sense?
I would disagree. I would say do try to copycat the style and then watch how it doesn't work out.
Right. It'll eventually become your own thing. It's never going to be 100% what you want.
The thing I would say to Javi is basically you don't have to make that clear distinction between work like and love. If you're having trouble making that, I should say, just pick one and try working in that style. And if it speaks to you, you'll know. But ultimately, I cannot tell you how it feels for you. I can only say that for me, like there's clear moments in my career where I started off working digitally. I thought that you had to be a digital artist. Breaking into the industry 10 years ago, I thought that painting was dead. Well, I was wrong. I went to a convention called a LuxCon and saw this amazing original art. And I was like, holy crap, I can oil paint. And I went to the illustration masterclass to learn how to oil painting. And my work took an immediate jump just by switching to traditional media, because I've been drawing and painting my whole life, either as a hobbyist or in school. And so once I got the cramps out and got the dust off of everything, that just started to flow for me. But I would have never known that had I not worked in digital. So it's silly for me to say that it was a bad experience to work in digital. Just pick something and work in it. And if it works for you, you'll kind of know. And
you'll feel it. You'll know it. You'll have that. And then I don't want to call it an aha moment, but you'll have that moment.
I had an artist very early on who I respect said, you're not going to paint anything that matters until you've done 50 paintings, and you're not going to paint anything that has a legacy until you've done 500 paintings. Now, I don't know if I specifically agree with those hard numbers, but what he was saying, I think it stands through, which is the secret to getting good at painting is make lots of paintings. If 50 helps you, then yeah, finish 50 paintings. And I don't just mean make 50 paintings, finish 50 paintings to the best of your skill, whatever that is for where you are, and then just keep going. And along the way, you will, break it apart. Chris, you want to throw in on that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's very important you have to have experience. You're not going to know what you're doing at the beginning, no matter what. So it's, finding your voice, finding your style isn't something that comes easily or quickly. Yes, there are outliers. There are people who hit the ground running and they have this thing already working for them. But I would put money on over the length of their entire career, it's going to change. And I think you can see that with most artists. If you look at someone from where they began, where they were in the middle, and at the end, there is going to be an evolution. And you can't fight it. You can't force it. And it just kind of happens. And that's one of the frustrating things, because I remember being really eager as a young artist, desperate to find my voice, to do these big pieces, to do these things. And I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the experience. And it just, it's a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting question from Darby here saying, writer artist, do you see similarities in your author voice and artistic voice? Further, does the process differ for a character of your own creation and an existing one in mythology? Chris, you've been doing a lot of writing recently. Alan, you've also been doing some writing recently. Do you guys have any thoughts on your authorial voice? Authorial voice is hard to say. Your author voice.
The things you write.
Yeah.
I tend to just write everything I'm thinking as if I'm talking to somebody. Like if I was telling you the story of my main character, I would write the way I'm just speaking to you right now, right? And then I go back and edit later for readability. I don't, that's why I have a good editor, But I feel I don't think there's 100% difference there, because it's you're you when you write. Does that make sense? I don't know if I become the character until I'm doing I guess sometimes you do when you're writing an action sequence or trying to feel for the main characters. He's my go-to guy, so I have to make sure he's awesome at all times. Whereas the bad guy is kind of, you want the bad guy to feel like a bad guy too. So I guess you kind of change your voice depending on what you're writing. Does that make sense?
Chris, do you have any thoughts with the amount of writing you've been doing recently?
Yeah, because there are many, many voices in my book, because it's a collection of archives and stories and narratives and poems and research and stuff. So it's all these compiled together, and throughout them there's a narrative that goes through. But and there are definitely voices that I enjoy writing with more. But they're all monsters. They're all have their own idiosyncrasies. They have their own history, their own the way they look at the world. And it's just part of it's expounding on my art. It's really an extension to be able to cover everything that I feel like I can't put into a single piece. I have pages and pages of writing that will help build that world. And by doing the writing, it's helped to influence how I'm going to approach the next pieces, because I type something in and do a description or talk about something and go, ooh, that's really interesting. So I'm going to have to do that again later. And, it's part of the problem solving. For me, it's problem solving. It's okay, if this is going to happen, how do I resolve it? And how is this character going to resolve it versus another? And, and I have what would be considered a villain, and they are the best to work with. Because
one thing I was going to say off of Alan's thing of like, you want the hero to feel like a hero and a villain to feel like a villain. That would be a note between my style, because I want a hero to feel like a villain and a villain to feel like a hero. Like
okay.
I love that. I don't know. I get really into those gray areas. But and the other thing I want to throw in, since the question of like existing characters and mythology, which most of my art, if you go to fatefulsigns.com, you'll see is about Norse mythology and my ongoing conversation with those various gods and goddesses. And I very much feel like with certain paintings, I am channeling something else. I am channeling another voice, even if ultimately that's just my own subconscious and the various parts of my own self that the various parts of a pantheon help you understand better in yourself. But I know, like for me, when thinking about an Odinic figure versus, say, Thor, so you get this really specific mental image if you're familiar with those two archetypes. If you're not, you're going to see something different. But you have this old trickster wizard who wears different masks and lies to people, who's really sly and great with women. And God, I just love Odin so much, and I can like talk about him for days. And that's why I've done so many Odin paintings, where for me, like Thor kind of has two modes. He's like the dude you want to go out and drink with, and then he gets really mad and starts killing things. And I have a much harder time relating to Thor, but on the same side, I know guys in my life that are more like Thor than they are like Odin. And so that's the other thing I tend to do when I'm trying to evoke those things. Like when I'm asking myself, what would Thor do? There's certain people in my life that I think along those lines. I mean, similar to like, we may not all like Loki, but we all have a Loki in our life at some point that we can point to. And we're like, yeah, I was really close to that guy once, and then things went bad, and now I don't talk to that guy so much anymore. And that's why those mythological archetypes do resonate so strongly. And for me, I can't help but put their voices into the art, but it's still my interpretation of those various voices coming through. And maybe it's not that different when you make the character. Chris, like, since you're making up your own characters, you're not writing Loki, but I'm certain you're calling inspiration from people you've known or things you've been in your own past.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have an entire lifetime of experiences and things to draw from, and I think ultimately, that's my art. Having traveled and seen Europe and the old cities and things built upon layers has done nothing but help me build my world better, to actually see what these things look like. And what does an old city look like when there's hundreds of years of construction? Because you can't really see that in the US. You have to go out into the world and find it. And like, what do the overpacked, super crowded cities of Asia look like with towering buildings and narrow alleys full of stuff? It's like you have to go and experience. You have to go look at these things. You have to learn about them and process it and find your way through it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really good question here, which might be our closing question, from Sarah, saying, how do you get your fans to also enjoy the other things you do when they only like one type of subject matter you do, even though everything is in your same style? Mermaids versus fairies versus butterflies, which I'm not sure there's a big difference between mermaids, fairies, and butterflies. But to be fair, I get your point, though, Sarah, which is, what is going on in there is you're not going to bring everyone with you as you change. I've seen some artists make some really big changes. Alan Williams is one who comes to mind, where, he was working one way and actually doing like little dragon paintings at Ren fairs, and then went on to be the concept artist behind some of the recent Star Trek movies and Pan's Labyrinth, and just like very, very different feel to all that stuff. And so you will make changes, and you know what? It's okay for you to change. It's okay for you to evolve, and it's also okay that you don't bring 100% of your audience with you. I think you will bring a good portion of your audience with you, and if you teach them along the way and don't just trick them or scare them into it, but tell them what you're doing as you're going. Bring them on that journey of change and self-discovery with you. Both you guys are nodding your heads. Why don't you guys jump in on that?
Like early on, I started doing a lot of fan art stuff first in my style. And, as I started evolving into my own Ancient One series, the style was changing and so was the artwork, right? It's all like different. So when I used to do the shows early on, I used to have half the table full of fan art and half the table full of the Ancient One stuff. And then all the people that loved me for the fan art would show up and be like, what's this stuff here? And I tell them about the series. And I slowly started like integrating, like every time you saw me at a different show, there'd be less fan art and more of the Ancient One stuff, right? Yeah. Eventually it became 100% Ancient Ones. And yes, I lost a chunk of fans who would come to the table and be like, oh, I want to buy a Captain America. I want to buy an Aquaman. Okay. I don't know what's Aquaman, but yeah, know. But either way, the point is they wanted the fan art, and I'd be like, oh, I don't sell that anymore. If you want to do a commission, I can do a commission piece for you. But I'm now focused on my own series, and a larger percentage of them stayed with me, which was a cool feeling, right? Because they were like, oh, I just love your art, so I'm going to stay with you. And then, oh, there's a story for this. This is even better than I thought, And then a small percentage was like, I'm out. And
right. Okay.
It's fine. And I was just like, that's cool, man. Thanks for supporting me all these years. I appreciate it. Right. Like, and they weren't mad. They were kind of disappointed, right? Because they wanted, and it happens occasionally still at shows. Gen Con last year, I had people stop by asking for fan art. And I was just like, this is weird. I never sold fan art at Gen Con, but they saw me at another con back in the day and they saw my name and they associated me with that and they came by to get stuff. Right. So yeah, it's fine. They'll grow with you, which is the best part if they want to.
Hey, Chris, you want to throw in on that?
Yeah, I mean, for the last 21 years, I've been working for clients, and and I've done some very high profile things for the Star Wars games and stuff. So I have sold a lot of Star Wars stuff, and I've eliminated all of it. And I've been very vocal with people that buy from me that this stuff's going away. And I've been having some samples of the new work, and it's like, yes, but there's going to be this whole world that I've created, and here's my, I'm going to be doing a book, and I was able to launch my book at my last convention at the end of February, and it was I had a split table, and I was blowing out all of my stuff, but then also had a sample of the work from the book, and I had the book with me, the printer's proof, and be able to like kind of educate everyone. It's like, well, you like what I do over here with this? You like this Yoda? Well, you're gonna like this stuff even better. This is mine. This isn't George Lucas's. This is my story, my art, telling my things. And for the most part, people have been really excited, and like they've been also like, it's about damn time. Why is it taking this long?
Yeah. And for me, I've gone through at least 3 major iterations in the last 10 years. The first being that I started off doing zombie portraits and made the majority of my money drawing people as zombies at conventions and doing somewhere around 25 conventions a year in order to keep that going. And then I got art in the gaming industry. So I had a lot of Warhammer art, and then I had a lot of Legend of the Five Rings samurai combat art. And for a while, I would have all the game stuff and still had a banner that said I did zombie portraits, and then slowly started working Norse mythology stuff into that until Fateful Signs took over. Yeah, there's a comment here from David, penguins. Yep, I did some fan art as fan characters, but as penguins. That was a thing I tried for a while. And so I was always thrown up. But you know what the through line was through all of that was me. And I still have people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see what you're doing now. You did a zombie portrait of my wife and I when we got married 10 years ago. And we think of you every time we see that zombie portrait. And now we want to buy a print, a painting, a book, whatever your new thing is, because we want to continue to support you. And that's the thing I've found is I didn't just, take stuff away from people. I instead gave them more. And some people didn't, there are plenty of people I've done zombie portraits for that just fell off, and that, it was a one-time exchange, and that's okay. But I've picked up so many more people along the way that are here with me, and we're doing this thing together, and it feels more like a team. And that would be the thing I'd say to encourage you is the more you get in tune with yourself, with your heart, with your mind, with your own spiritual practices, and the more those things seep into your art, that's where your voice comes through. And so you can no longer separate you and the art. And that's where it comes to people start to follow you.
Yeah. People need the real you, not a fabricated version of what you think they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think that's it.
To Jobby's question way back, maybe that is how you know art that you want to, that you love, and art that you want to be is on some level, you're going to be able to answer that question yourself the more you dig in to know yourself, either through your spiritual practice, your meditation, therapy. Man, do I recommend therapy for artists. And that all lifts you up. And hopefully you've been building up your art skills along the way. And at some point, those two things are going to merge through a massive amount of self-exploration and experimentation. And when it hits, it's going to feel like fireworks. But along the way, it's going to feel a lot more like Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill. Anyway, we're going for about an hour. Either of you guys want to throw in any closing thoughts on our Aradani Con panel?
I always say, don't focus on, try not to focus too much on like, how do I sell this thing? How do I make a quick buck? I always say, just do the art you love and focus on that and find the joy in it, and everything else will follow suit. If you're not, people can tell when you're doing it for the money versus when you're doing it because you actually enjoy it. Does that, that's the advice I like to give. It's like, do the art you love, and you'll do just fine. And then you'll also be the real you. Like, you're not trying to fake your way through the system.
Chris?
I don't know. Everyone has their own journey, and and it's hard sometimes. It's awesome sometimes, and I just have to say, you have to stick with it. It's overcoming adversity and overcoming rejection, and being able to look at your own work objectively to know what you need to work on and what needs to change to make that next step is some of the hardest things that I've had to learn, and it's been the most rewarding once you can get there. You can kind of brush off rejection and realize that, you need to start this entire piece over because it's just not working, or you need to find that twist.
Ariescape said one more question for us, which we'll try to do quick here, which is, do you have advice for artists who try to shy away from fan art? Don't do it. There's no reason to do it. It's a trap, and it's sometimes a harder trap to dig yourself out of. So it's not worth getting into necessarily in the first place. Like Alan's talking about, people coming up, and to be fair,
I did fan art back in the day because it was just something I really liked. I love comic books. I leaned into that, but I realized after like 2 years of that this is going to turn into a thing I don't want to do. And that's why I started focusing on my own art and then pushing it.
Chris, I don't think you ever really did fan art. All your stuff was officially licensed projects that you worked on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't like, unless I'm hired to do something, I'm not going to do someone else's thing. That's just how I've been my entire career. I've always made my own stuff, made my own monsters until I was hired to make things. I mean, I've done a series of drawings where I redesigned monsters from Dungeons and Dragons, but that was while I was actively working on Dungeons and Dragons. So it was just practice for me. It was just something I was doing to, like, how would I draw a beholder, or how would I draw an illithid, or, it was basically me practicing, and just kind of loosening up and trying to find my own voice. But yeah, unless I'm hired, people always come up like, you got any Darth Mauls? You got any Boba Fett's? And I'm like, nope, they didn't hire me to do it, so I don't have it.
And, even with fan art, I give the same advice to people, which is, if you don't love Darth Maul, don't do a Darth Maul piece, because regardless of what you make, your love of it is going to show through in the art. If you had fun making a thing, that comes through. So Ariescapes, I'd say, don't worry about the fan art. Just make stuff that you love and keep releasing it and putting out more of it. Go to when we get to go to conventions again, go to live events where you're able to share all that stuff. And I think you'll find it may be a little bit of a hurdle. It may feel like these other artists are being lifted up by their fan art, but just as often the fan art becomes a crutch and an obstacle for their careers.
Yep.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. If you enjoyed this talk, I'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. Trying to grow my YouTube channel. So anything you guys can do to throw in on that, I really appreciate it. Chris, Alan, thank you guys so much for being on. If you would, one more time, Chris, where can people find your work?
At christopherburdett.blogspot.com. All my links are there, and that's where I post all the time.
All right, Alan?
All my stuff's at ancientones.net. All the information's there, including the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and you can find my work at fatefulsigns.com. And I know that Alan and I are going to be doing a panel for AradaniCon at 6. So if you want to check out the link for AradaniCon is also right down there. If you want to see their schedule and the other events going on today, I hope to see you guys over there in the Discord chat and at some of these other events later on. So thanks again to the Aradani crew. You guys are great. And thanks to each and every one of you who is either watching this live or watching it at home. We love you guys, and let's stay strong through this difficult time.
All right. Definitely.
Later.